Is criminality a class issue in America? In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they're even born?
Well, listen to me.
Um,
You could have grabbed your toothbrush and started doing this.
Personally, yes. There is an issue with criminality in America. Each and every day, you hear about the amount of deaths, robberies, and so much more in America. But you don't hear it in other countries.
I'm really gonna brush it and I'm gonna spank you.
I feel like a lot of rich criminals get away with their crimes while the poor have to suffer. Poor and rich should suffer the same amount. Like, say a rich person goes and kills somebody and a poor person goes and kills somebody. But the rich usually get away with stuff because of the amount of money and power that they have. It like prevents a lot of rich criminals from having to suffer and going to prison and court and all this other stuff, while poor people are stuck with going to court and they go to prison and do probation and all this other stuff that the rich just don't have to do. So yes, there is a class issue with criminality in America. Is criminality a class issue in America? In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they're even born?
I would say yes, on one hand, there is. If you have someone who is born into a culture that is a family that commits crime to survive, or commits crime because that's what they do, or uses drugs or sells drugs, if he grows up in that culture, that's going to be what he knows. But on the other hand, you have students or you have youth that grow up in an environment like this that change the pattern of their family and go on to be something great. So yes, I think it's an issue, but I think that we also have a lot of people who can overcome that oppression and don't necessarily have to be born into that fate.
Is criminality a class issue in America? In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they are even born? I forgot the question for a second, guys.
Okay. In my opinion, I would say no. Because based off of like my, I guess, family background, specifically on like my dad's side, he made like bad decisions, and that doesn't affect me now. He's like done different things that probably aren't mentionable on camera, but I'm trying to be the opposite. So like his past and his dad's past and his grandpa's past aren't gonna affect my future. I'm not set up to fail like that. It's like um, it's mostly on me. I'm not gonna let my family background, or if say like I was never really like raised in the ghetto or anything, but I'm not gonna let that set me up for failure.
Is criminality a class issue in America? In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they are even born?
I think that there is, to an extent. I think that the types of crimes are different between the classes. For the most part, I mean, everybody murders, has thieves, that sort of thing. But I think that the upper class people tend to have more white collar crime type crimes. Middle, and lower class people tend to have more violent type crimes against people. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with people's attitudes. Our country in general, that if you're born in poverty, you always remain in poverty. You will always be. If you were born as into a criminal family, you will always be a criminal. I don't agree with that. I think that's a belief in our country, and I think it's wrong. I think there's been too many examples over the years showing kids that have come from horrible backgrounds that go on to be Pulitzer Prize winners and the top of their class, doctors, the top of their field, lawyers, for them to say that if you're born in poverty or born into a family of criminals, you're going to remain that way. But I think that is an attitude that needs to change in this country, or it's just we're going to stay separated.
Class issue in America. In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they are even born?
For me personally, I'd say there is kind of, just because of what my mother and my father went through when I was young. My mom did drugs, and she sold drugs, and she ran stoplights when she didn't even have a license. And my dad did drugs, stole from stores, and from their examples, I'd say I don't want to be in their footsteps. I don't want to follow their examples, because that's just not something I want to do. But my mom's mom did the same, so I just want to make a change and not do that.
So, but do you think it's like an issue in America?
For some families, if they're going through a really hardship, or if they're going through like some type of issue, like they can't afford stuff, then they have a choice of stealing or doing drugs and selling. Like some teens do, because they don't have jobs or something, at East. But at the same time, other families make the right choice in earning that money and going for the right thing and earning what they buy in America. So.
A class issue in America. In other words, is there a systematic nature of oppression that determines the fate and future of certain people before they're even born?
I would say yes. Criminality is a class issue. I don't know if it's a systematic nature of oppression that keeps people down, but clearly there's a class component to criminality in this country and in most other countries, because if you're born into a family of poverty, or we know a single parent family, or if you grow up in a tough neighborhood with high crime, you know that you're going to have more contact with police, there's going to be more contact with criminals and criminal elements in society, you're more likely to commit crimes. So I mean, yeah, it's clear that class has something to do with criminality in America, and that people who grow up poor are more likely to end up in the criminal justice system.
So here is a list of crime reports in 2011. It's in order from the highest to the lowest. As you see, USA is number 1, while the Netherlands is 10. So this list right here proves my point that America does have the highest crime reports, and it is a class issue. Also, my other points would be that I agree with what everyone that I've interviewed has said. There are points that you, I hope, also agree with, because there's some stories that are very personal, and then there's some that are just facts that they have. Thank you.